What is going on, OWS fam, YouTube fam? Welcome to week 4 of Props Talk. I'm your host, JMToWin, here with my guy, Jreasy. Reezy, how we doing, man?
Man, we're doing good. We're on to week 4. We've learned some stuff. We've had some great calls. We made a few mistakes, but as you said earlier, week 4, week 5, week 6. This is where we're gonna make our money. We have a little bit more 2025 data. We understand these coaches, the players a little bit more, and just how they want to play. So we're feeling good going into week 4.
Yeah. And one of the things that I like about that concept is that we're not just looking at spreadsheets, and we've talked about this in past weeks, but and for any of you who are new to this show, just tuning in, you see a prop show or you've been paying attention to other OWS stuff, you like what we do for DFS and you're hopping on here. As with DFS, where we don't really provide picks, we obviously do have our player pools and who we like on the slate, but like that's not the edge in DFS. The edge in DFS is understanding like the strategy and roster construction, all that. We focus heavily on that. And so similarly, this isn't a picks show, although with props, what we are doing with our props product is literally just giving you picks. But we're able to kind of use this show to talk through some of the things that some of the bets we've taken this week. Some of them are still viable to take based on whatever the juice is on those bets. And some of them are not, right? But it's the opportunity to talk through the process of how we're seeing these things. And these are things that you can carry into your own prop betting and even into DFS, right? Or into fantasy or whatever else, because we're just going to hit on different things about these teams and players. But yeah, like you said, Josh, the opportunity to kind of watch these teams through the first few weeks and understand what's real, what's not. There's actually, we were talking before the show, at the end of this show, we always hit on a couple alt lines where we can kind of run those ladders up on, yeah, this guy's might not just go over, he might go way over. And two of the guys that I threw in the bucket are both guys where it's like, people just don't believe in these guys yet. And this is why the lines might be where they're at. And so, this is a fun point in the season where we start to feel like we have enough information to feel informed on certain things, but the books might not have that information all the way. And so, really excited to dive in today. Josh, you want to talk through anything from last week before we get on to this week?
Yeah, I mean, we had a little bit of a rough week 3. Things didn't really go our way with the game scripts. It was a pretty wild 1 p.m. slate. There's so many defensive kind of turnovers and special teams touchdowns. An early pick 6 from Cam Ward. That one really hurt us. He went over our passing yard prop by 15 yards. It was only 209. So, just kind of those last few possessions really killed us there. And unfortunately, we doubled up there with Tony Pollard. We had a receiving yards over that he got on the last drive, just 2 catches late. Drake May and the Patriots, your guys turned the ball over 5 times, and it just led to a huge pass rate over expectation. And they actually had the ball at the end of both halves, which I think was something that we brought up is, the way that this bet loses the most often is that we just kind of lose those last 2 4-minute drills of both halves. And Drake May got both. So we're very rarely going to win any passing over attempts when our quarterback has the ball in those 8 minutes. Just one of those weeks. We went 4-7 for a loss of about 4 units with the juice. Leaves us down 1 unit after 3 weeks. But as you said, week 4, week 5, we feel good now that we get to have the data and we get to make our decisions now to get those out. On the plus side, we had a perfect 5-0 weekend from our CFL bets, and that takes our record there to 57-40. CFL season starts a little bit earlier than the NFL season, so we've been in these streets for a little while now, and that's an 11% ROI, which is pretty elite in this space in any any sport. Our CFL bets, they are Canadian Football League, but they're available everywhere. We track those very strictly versus FanDuel for the very vast majority of them. 1 or 2 DK only, but we're up against FanDuel there, which we consider the gold standard at 11% ROI. We love that. I just want to give a shout out to Bolster. He's our CFL predictive analyst, a good old Canadian boy, and he's just been doing an excellent job for this full season. He's on a hot run now. I think it's something like 8 out of 9 weeks profitable. The 8 of the last 9 weeks profitable. And with this 5-0 this weekend, he's really coming to play, and we really enjoy that. He works really hard, and we're glad to see it.
Yeah. And we were talking about the CFL stuff before the show, and it's one of the things that I think is important to shout out. I was talking to you too about like, let's make sure that the NFL, the people who are in that NFL channel, even though they're getting the alerts for the CFL, like make sure they're aware this is included in their NFL props betting package because what we always talk about at OWS, one of the things I talk about in DFS, right? And Aaron and I were talking about this earlier today on our call was like, we always encourage people, if you're not winning money on the main slate in DFS, you don't have to just keep banging your head against the wall on the main slate. Like there are actually softer games out there, right? So for me personally, I spend so much time focusing on the main slate for content that I have less of an edge on some of the softer games and more of an edge on the main slate because I put so much focus into that. But most of our subscribers probably have a greater edge in afternoon only or early only or Monday or the Thursday to Monday slates or the Monday to Thursday 2-gamers or the showdowns or whatever it is, because people are spending less time on that. And if you spend a little bit more time on that, you have that edge. And so similarly, like, we can go where the edge is. And right now this edge is on the, like you and I were talking before the show about when we were hitting college basketball a year or two ago. And it was like the algorithm was broken. We were getting like 30-40% ROI there for a few months. And not everybody was able to get those bets, but the people who were just raking in money during that time. And so similarly, like we've got this edge in CFL right now. We're going to, like, people want to come in the door to bet NFL, right? That's what they're excited about. That's what they're watching on Sundays, but you don't have to watch CFL. You don't have to understand 12 guys in the field, what's going on with all this motion. Like, but just getting those bets given to you and being able to bet those, I think there's a big edge there. And that's something that I wanted to shout out as well. And also breaking down where the bets went wrong, right? Like you talked in the Props Insider channel about, we got it wrong on the Quinshon Judkins thing, right? In terms of his workload, but everything else is like, how did Drake May end up going over when we took the under on the pass attempts? It was interesting. Actually, I graded like drive by drive 14 different teams this week. And the Patriots were one of my highest graded teams in terms of how they played. And that was even with the fumbles and interceptions, right? You take those out and they would have been right there at the top. Like they controlled that game. And had it not been for all these fumbles, really the fumbles, right? The interception, tip pass, and in the end zone. And then other than that, you got 4 fumbles, one of them at the goal line. So 2 touchdowns taken away. If not for all these fumbles, Patriots have a huge lead in that game, and they're in control of that game, and they're running the ball. And so flips the other way with all these unpredictable fumbles, and then the Patriots having the ball at the end of the halves, and all of a sudden things swing the wrong way on that. But we can understand like where we got unlucky on things versus where we made mistakes, and correct the places where we make mistakes, and also just continue down that same path in the places where you get unlucky, because over time those things break in your favor. So I mean, it's always cool to have these conversations, kind of what this show is for, is to be able to talk about these types of things. And some of the things that we saw last week, again, the Tony Pollard, like 1 yard over when we took the under, or, half yard over, Cam Ward getting that over there at the end. And those little things that sometimes you can't control those, but keep putting yourself in good position. That money comes your way over time. Josh, anything else to add on that before we turn the page to some of the things we're looking at for week 4?
Yeah, I think the Judkins call is probably the only bet that comes to mind that we got wrong. I don't think that we were the only ones. I don't think that many people had Judkins coming out and getting every carry in the backfield. That was a little tough to watch. Sampson's pretty much not playing anymore, and then Ford was just coming in pretty sparingly. So we did get that one wrong. The Cleveland had a great game plan to get the win at the end. It kind of seemed crazy as the game was going on for them to just keep running as much as they were, but results don't lie, and when you get the W, it's kind of hard to complain too much.
Yeah, I mean, results don't lie. Results can be kind of variance working in your favor in terms of that game. My 6-year-old, is really getting into NFL now, and we've got all the logos on the fridge for like the matchups each week. He and his sister get to flip whoever lost, they flip them upside down. And so I was watching that game on, I don't know, Monday or Tuesday, and it was 10-0, and it was like end of the fourth quarter. He's like, wait, how did the Brownies? He's like, how did the Brownies win this game? And I was like, oh, we got to keep watching to see. But crazy things happen in the NFL. So we are going to try to harness, the crazy things that happen and turn that variance in our favor this week. And we're going to talk through some of these bets. First, we're going to talk about Thursday night props. So we're running this live. And some of you are watching this live. Some of you are watching this after the fact. And so this one might be already passed, but really liked this one. I'm going to throw it over to you to kind of talk through this Thursday night Trey Benson prop that we got out there.
Yeah, we're going to start with the Seattle. They're traveling to Arizona as 1.5-point favorites, total of 43.5 points here. This is the first game for Arizona without James Conner. And we have Trey Benson looking to assert himself as a bell cow for the remainder of the season with just Mari DeMarcado and Bam Knight, who has just 3 carries since he was Zonovan Knight, you might remember, back with the Jets in 2022 on the depth chart. So just not a lot of guys there for to really put up a big stink for Trey Benson here. And we think that the books and the public are underestimating the role that Benson had carved out in the first 2 games of the season before James Conner got hurt. And they're still kind of looking at him for what our perception of him was in 2024. Through the first 2 games of the season, Benson had run a route on a higher percentage of team dropbacks than James Conner, and he'd seen just as many targets. Fast forward to after week 3, Benson's up to running a route on 47% of team dropbacks, Well, DeMarcado, he's only ran 2 routes and seen 1 target through 3 games. So a 47% route participation is the 5th highest on the team. And this week, Zay Jones will be inactive, and he was 4th on the team in route percentage through 3 weeks. So a nice little combination there. That brought us to the Trey Benson over 3.5. We got it at plus 138. It's at plus 111 now here on DraftKings, and I think that's still okay. But once you kind of get down below plus money, I think you got to let that one go. JM, how do you feel about the Arizona Cardinals, how they run their offense in the wake of this James Conner injury? And how do you see DeMarcado's role kind of going forward behind Benson after he was kind of like an afterthought for 3 weeks, right? Like he wasn't really part of the game plan, and now he's kind of forced into there. How do you see that playing out?
Yeah, well, so one of the things that trapped me a little bit early on with prop betting was the overs on running back receptions, because then you kind of realize when you really get in there, it's like, oh, these are a little bit more unpredictable than you would expect. But one of the teams where I would say that's not really the case is the Cardinals. It's a pretty deeply schemed part of their passing attack. And so watching that Cardinals 49ers game this last week, it just continued popping to me how much of their offense was centered around James Conner. And this is before this discussion about this prop bet. This is before this prop bet was dropped. It was just like, man, James Conner is so central to what they are designing, right? The run game, the pass game, both of them. And then I go back to what was talked about in the offseason. And I love this because, you know, you and I, our rhythm at this point on this show is I drop you any bets I'm seeing, and you've dropped some bets in the channel. You and Pulse have dropped some bets in the bet channel, on Wednesday night, Thursday morning. And then you drop me the notes during the day and we come and talk, right? But like we haven't collaborated and talked about all the angles we're going to talk about here on the show, right? And we go back to the offseason, Jonathan Gannon was saying we have 2 number 1 backs, right? And he was saying, and that's why I haven't been playing James Conner in DFS so far this year, because part of what we like about James Conner is his role. And so when he's been on the field, he's still been central to everything they're doing. But they have treated Trey Benson this year like, hey, look, obviously James Conner is still our guy, but Trey Benson is the guy of our guy of the future. Like we really genuinely like him. We really like his development. We feel like he's taking a step forward. We're giving him more work this year, and we've seen that play out so far. So to me, when you have a guy like James Conner who goes down, it seems pretty unlikely that all of a sudden Emari Demercado is going to come in and just have like a huge role, right? To me, they're going to say, look, we trusted James Conner having 80% of these touches last year. Let's put Trey Benson in that role. And that schemed passing work is a big part of what they do in this offense. And so, yeah, to me, I was really surprised to see this at plus money. And I know it kind of goes back to what I said at the top with running back receptions can sometimes just be sort of unpredictable. I mean, what are you going to do? Put this at 4.5, right? Like that's a really high number. And so you put it at 3.5 and then it's like, yeah, but when you think about running backs holistically, that is kind of a high number. And so we'll put this at plus money and the bettors are taking it that way. But it's like, yeah, 3.5, honestly, at plus money just feels like a steal to me. And I really like this bet. This is one that when I saw it in the props channel last night, I was like, or last night, this morning, whenever it was like, oh yeah, that's a good one because he's going to step into this role. And in my mind, have a big portion of this role. We can always get curveballs, right? When there are running back injuries, we know that. But big picture, if we could kind of play out this scenario over and over again, this is definitely an edge to have this opportunity here with Trey Benson stepping into this role.
Yeah, it's kind of a, it's not a rule, but for us or for me personally, I try to stay away from running back receiving stuff. Just as you mentioned, it is kind of unpredictable unless you can get it at plus money. I think when you can get things at plus money, we don't take into consideration how much that, it limits how many times you have to get this right. So when we do kind of have these bets that are a little bit more can go either way, getting that plus money and not paying huge juice for these things is just a really good strategy. But one of the things that really put us over the edge here was that over the last 2 games, 6 of the 10 targets Benson has actually come on first or second down. So even though there is some worry that DeMarcado could come in and take some of the passing role stuff, the Cardinals are sending out a running back into the pass route pretty frequently on first and second down. And as you mentioned, just by design, Kyler's happy to throw these checkdowns. We've also seen a strong Seattle defense. They filtered 8.3 targets to the running back, which is a lot on its own, but it's for a 23.5% target share, which is great. This game is going to likely be, as you mentioned, it's going to be McBride. It's going to be the running backs. You might get a couple of throws out to Marv, but the coaches and Kyler himself have already come out and said that they're not going to force it out to Marv. And we might just have a little bit of an easier path here through the running backs. And at plus money, we're going to try to take advantage of that here while everything is still a little bit uncertain. Yeah,
I like this one a lot. And honestly, like, it's not unusual for the Cardinals to keep that lead back on the field on third down either, right? So having that on top of the opportunity to kind of get this guy who's getting these opportunities for reception on first and second down, really sharp bet there. And a good one for this Thursday night game, which should be a fun game, actually. Cardinals have looked really stout on defense with kind of all the smoke and mirrors they throw, kind of like a Vikings light type of defense in terms of the difficulties they throw at a quarterback. And yeah, should be the type of game environment where Trey Benson can stay involved throughout. All right, next what we're going to talk about is an offense that looks bad. You had some notes on this in the NFL Bet This channel. I had some notes on this in my journal and Discord for DFS stuff. But yeah, talk to me about this bet that we're taking on the Falcons this week.
Yeah, we're going to move over to the Washington Commanders at the Atlanta Falcons. The game has a 45.5 point total, and the Commanders are 1.5 point favorites on the road. And the angle that we're going to come in, as you mentioned, is on the Atlanta side, where it just looks like we may have jumped the gun on Michael Penix a little bit too early after 3 games just last year. This year, he's averaged 202 passing yards per game, and almost half of those came against Week 1 versus Tampa Bay. We came into the season thinking that the connection with Drake London was going to explode, but it just hasn't really been there to the start of 2025 after ending 2024 with 31 targets and 2 OT losses. Just quite the volume there. In Week 1, London did see 15 targets, resulted in just 55 yards, though. In Week 2 and Week 3, London's only seen 12 targets combined, resulting in just 104 scoreless yards. And we kind of think that the week 1 here in 2025, those targets can kind of be explained because Darnell Mooney was injured, and Mooney's actually out-targeted Drake London 15-12 in the last 2 weeks. Pitts and Bijan Robinson, he's moved back to Bijan. They had 11 targets over that time, just 1 behind London. It's not really just a one-trick pony show, and people seem to be a lot more involved than they were in those 2 games last year in that small sample size. So we actually grabbed Drake London at under 67.5 receiving yards. It looks like it's 66.5 here on DraftKings. That's still good. It actually opened on 64.5 and it was bet up. So once it got up to the 67, we put an end to that and knocked it back down a couple. He's under in all 3 games this season, and there's no real signs that the Atlanta offense has actually figured out a way to move the ball. They got embarrassed versus Carolina just last week. We'd love to see both Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin out for the other side, but it does look like Jaden McDaniels is going to play maybe 2 limited practices here on Wednesday and Thursday after getting ruled out really early last week on Friday. So we do think that, there's a good chance that Jaden McDaniels is at least going to try to play, but Terry McLaurin, he looks like he's out after seeing a core muscle specialist for something that was, designated as a quad injury earlier. Anytime you go to get a second opinion, always bad news for your availability in my books. With Mariota last week, the Washington Commanders, their defense saw the lowest PROE against, despite playing the pass-heavy Raiders, and they now sit at a minus 3.6 pass rate over expectation against on the season. To us, it just kind of seems like a good spot for this trend to continue. Even if Daniels does play, he'll be unlikely to be at full health, and it does suit up, and it does kind of situate us for maybe a little bit more ground and pound, maybe protect Daniels a little bit more. Jam, I'm interested to hear your thoughts here on the Atlanta offense as a whole. With the Atlanta, the Atlanta coaches already had to come out and confirm that Penix is a starter here after just 3 games. So, for them to feel like they had to do that makes us kind of feel like, hey, where does this confidence lie?
Yeah, and I mean, it was yesterday, 2 days ago, Ike Hilliard was fired as the wide receivers coach. So you get an early fall guy for. I mean, that's how bad the offense has been. Is that you're firing the wide receivers coach? You're saying we've got to do something, right? We got to shake something up. And so, yeah, I'll tell you what. Like, we've got such a small sample size with Penix, so I don't want to stamp down anything. Just like people stamped down things too early last year in that 3-week stretch. But I just so happened to watch the Dolphins game and the Falcons game back to back, right? I've been watching all the games this year. And when I watched that game, it was like, Penix doesn't look dissimilar from Tua, right? Like all the talk last year was like, oh, and he's got this great arm. The ball just zips out. I know they're both lefties. So like your brain kind of tricks yourself a little bit into like, oh, this looks like the same thing. But like his decision-making, actually Chris Sims broke it down on his Unbuttoned podcast. I think that came out on Wednesday this week of like just how bad Penix looked this last week. And like, his mechanics were off and his decision-making was off. And, I said in my journal entry a couple of days ago that it just looked like he didn't show up to play. It just looked very lazy mentally and physically. He had a lot of like soft throws out to the flat. Like he had the pick 6, but he had a couple others that could have been pick 6'd as well, where it was like, he's looking off to the right and then he just turns to the left and kind of tosses it out there and dude's just waiting there for it. Right. And so I do think that when I see something like this, that's just so off, I tend to want to see it turn around, like see signs of it turning around before I start to believe it, right? It's rare that, and I look at these things through the lens of a DFS player, but there's this tendency to be like, man, like this week, Penix is 5,100 on DraftKings, and it's like, but can't he have a big game? And I think in large field play, you can take that swing, but like, that's not the place where you want to stamp things down in single entry 3 max, because it's like, yeah, he can have that big game out of nowhere, but it's highly unlikely. Usually you're going to see signs of things turning around before that big game comes. And so it's really just fear-based to be like, oh yeah, but I got to have him because he's so cheap and he's capable of these big games. And realistically, we're probably going to see those signs first. So yeah, this offense doesn't look right. Now, there's a few things, right? It can start to turn around pretty quickly. And part of the way that they could look to turn around is, hey, let's emphasize Drake London. Another way that they could look to turn it around, as you alluded to, is running the ball, which is the strength of their offense and the way that teams have been attacking Washington. On top of that, Drake London, he's not a separator. Darnell Mooney he's really the only separator on this team that gets like open space between him and a defender, which is why we always say for DFS purposes, only play Drake London in shootouts because he needs the volume in order to pile up those stats. And so, this under on yard, like this one isn't one that I would have looked at the slate and been like, I would have looked at him like, you said it got better from 64.5 to 67.5. Like I would have looked at him and been like, I don't know. But then like, I really like you guys digging into this one and taking the under. So not one that I would have seen, but definitely one that like, when I look at it and look at the rationale, it's like, yeah, I could definitely see that one this week for sure.
Yeah, you hate to be late to the party on these types of things, but Atlanta has just one and I know this sounds crazy, but Atlanta has just one pass attempt from under center this season, and they have a 93% pass rate out of the shotgun, right? So if they're under center, that they've only thrown the ball one time. So from a defensive standpoint, you were mentioning earlier on one of these Phoenix throws that the guy just seemed like he knew it was coming, that he was standing there waiting for it, and there is something to say that they might actually know that. So, when you're only throwing one time from under center and then 93% at a shotgun, teams just, they film study. And if we know that, you can guarantee that you can guarantee other NFL teams know that too. But they have the lowest deep passing rate. They have the 4th lowest play action rate. It's really hard to run play action at a shotgun a lot of time. You want to be doing that from under center, but all they do is run. It seems like teams are not really getting fooled that much. And the play calling of the Falcons, we're just betting that this is sticky for at least one more week before the Falcons have their bye next week. That bye next week, it really makes a lot of sense that they're not going to panic. They're not going to change everything this week, knowing that they do have that bye next week. We believe that they're just going to run the ball and just try to get out of this to get to that bye and figure things out. I just have a note here that if you do want to impress your friends this weekend, you're out there at the bar, you're sitting with your guys, just see if you can call it the play, like Tony Romo does before the snap, right? That, hey, they're under center, just be like, I think this is going to be a run, or they're in a shotgun, be like, they're going to pass it here, and just see how many times you can do this in a row and see if it is sticky here in week 4.
There you go. All right, so we got one more straight bet to look at before we get to the alt lines. This is one I sent to you this morning, and why don't you introduce it, give any notes you've got on it, and then I'll talk this one up a little bit.
Yeah, we're gonna go over this KC Baltimore game. 3-point home dogs for Kansas City with a 48.5 game total. This should be a great afternoon slate. It's a 4:25 start. Your TV should be here. We have both teams at 1 and 2, and that they want to avoid going 1 and 3 to start the season. We don't get too many instances where either of these two teams are playing must-win games in September, but this kind of feels like it. But here we are. Both teams are going to do whatever they need to do to get the W and build momentum into October. We're going to go with Patrick Mahomes over 4.5 rush attempts here at plus money. It's down to 106 here. That's pretty much that's the line here for me. You want to see if you can find it maybe on a smaller book that still is a plus money here, but this Patrick Mahomes is 12-10 to the over since the start of last season, including 3-0 to start here in 2025. Jam, is there some reason to think that Patrick Mahomes may be taking upon himself here a little bit more in 2025 with KC struggling, especially with the run game? There's a similar situation after the start of last year when Pacheco got hurt. And I think maybe the next 5 or 6 games in a row, Patrick Mahomes went over his rush total each of those games. So Jam, how are you feeling here?
Yeah, and so my thinking when I sent this to you guys was, once you started digging in, you were like, oh yeah, I really like this one. We'll make this one official. You said he's 12-10 to the over, right, in his last 22 games, but he's 3-0 so far this season. And so what stood out to me is, first off, you have this situation. You put ourselves in the players' minds. The Chiefs are 1-2. The Ravens are 1-2. This is a playoff game, right? The Chiefs still have the Lions in a couple of weeks before they get Rashee Rice back. So this is effectively a playoff game. Can they still be there in the playoffs, when it's all said and done, even if they lose this game, of course, like more than likely, whoever loses this game, it like to me, I still, when you watch all the games, all the teams, like the Chiefs defense, their physicality, what they're doing on that side of the ball, it still pops, right? Like they still look like one of the better defenses in the NFL. And even though they don't have the explosiveness on offense, they still have they make fewer mistakes. They have a better sense of who they are and what they're doing on offense than most other teams in the NFL. So like, even though things haven't looked good for the Chiefs so far and the negativity around them is immense at this point, and we all know the Ravens have looked great, and it's just like they kind of blew that game to the Bills there at the end, and then they got, a few drives didn't go their way against the Lions, right? All of a sudden they're 1-2. Both these teams are probably still there even if they lose this game, but like this game is huge, right? You can't just say, yeah, we're going to be there at the end. Well, Patrick Mahomes has talked openly this season about how usually he waits until December, January, those had-to-have-it games to really put his body on the line, because he understands that it's important for him to stay healthy, but also in those games, he understands that there are things that he can do to help his team that maybe it's not smart to do that in September, in early October, when you're just trying to grind through the season and make the playoffs. But when you get to those December, January games, you have to win those games. Well, Patrick Mahomes basically says, okay, now's the time where the risk reward is in my favor to put my body on the line, to take these shots, to go run, and run somebody over. We've seen him 2-3 times this year, throw his shoulder into a defensive back on the sidelines when there's no need to do that, where there's no need to take that hit. And it's him basically sending a message to the team like, hey, we're here to fight, right? We're here to keep doing this. And so Patrick Mahomes has said this year that he has been putting his body on the line more often early in the season because he feels like the team needs that at this point in the year. So add that to the fact that we've got this game against Baltimore that's, still one of the best teams in football in spite of their 1-2 record. And the fact that both of these teams are 1-2, and one of these teams is going to come out of this game 1-3, unless it's 1-2-1, which, nobody wants. But let's just say one of these teams is going to come out of this game 1-3. And so it all lines up for Patrick Mahomes to say, yeah, this is a spot where if I got to take off and run, I'm going to take off and run, right? And so it just makes sense from that you can't look at it on the spreadsheet, but you zoom out, you pay attention to what the players are saying, you pay attention to the situation, you pay attention to how these teams have been playing, and it really makes a ton of sense for this to be a spot where Patrick Mahomes says, hey, look, if I got to take off and run a few times, I'm going to take off and run a few times. We're going to do anything we can to convert this drive into first downs. We're going to do anything we can to convert this drive into points. And I think we're going to see that level of aggressiveness in this game. So, over 4.5 rushing attempts at plus money. It's another one kind of like the running back receptions, right? Like so many things can go wrong with quarterback rush attempts. But realistically, we've got this line 4.5. That means it's pretty much 50-50 to either side, right? And so to me, I can look at this and say, no, if we played out this game over and over again, it's well over 50% to the upside, and we're getting plus money on it, which just makes it a really nice bet in this spot.
Yeah, I actually think that we get 2 outs here, right? This is a really strong bet. We get the kneel equity late if the Chiefs are Winning, and if they're losing, Patrick Mahomes will be, he'll be doing whatever he needs to, this win is twofold. Not only do the Chiefs need to win, but they're able to hand, one of their, if not their biggest rivals in the Baltimore Ravens a loss, right? So, this is not going to be a game that in these final minutes that anybody's kind of taking it easy. We've seen that in the 2 losses that the Chiefs have this year. I think Patrick Mahomes has 8 carries and 7 carries. Both games he didn't have any kneels. Obviously they were losing, so he's showing that in games that they're losing, he's going to run a lot. And then we did get that win versus the New York Giants, and we got there in the kneels at the end of the game. So we do have 2 outs here. It's not game script proof, but we should have a chance to win this in the final minutes, kind of either way.
Yeah, and another thing I like too. Obviously, we don't get the quarterback sneaks from Mahomes because he got hurt a few years ago, and they don't use him on sneaks anymore. But there's also this component of in this spot where even if the Chiefs fall behind, we saw it in the Super Bowl last year. I was watching that game. My wife's parents always come up to visit around the week of the Super Bowl, so I'm watching that game with my father-in-law. And Mahomes was taking some shots in the third quarter of that Super Bowl. And I was like, they got to get him out of here because he's going to put his body on the line, even if they're losing, he's got that dog in him that he's like, we're going to send a message to my teammates that we're still here to fight. It doesn't matter what the score is. It doesn't matter if it's impossible for us to win. We're going to keep fighting. We're going to keep trying to win. And he was putting his body on the line and taking huge shots in that game where it's like, dude, you guys have lost this game. Somebody's got to protect this man. Right. So it's like, if you're behind in this game, even if it starts to get to a point where it's insurmountable, we know that Mahomes is going to keep putting his body on the line and going out there and trying to send a message to his teammates. And so, this just feels like, honestly, from a DFS perspective too, I've stepped back and been like, are there that many spots that are better than Patrick Mahomes at 6K on DraftKings
Yeah.
in a game where the weapons aren't great, but it's like, if you have to have this game, you know that Patrick Mahomes is going to be doing everything he can and try to provide that superhuman effort. So I think that this is one where the kind of non-spreadsheet type stuff lines up really nicely, and we can get an edge on the books because they're going to look at very straightforward math-based components, and we can kind of step out of that in certain spots every once in a while and say, okay, there's an edge that the books are not able to account for here, and this is one of those spots this week. All right, so we always like to close the show talking about some alt lines. If you guys are new to sports betting, new to prop betting, unfamiliar with alt lines, these are basically like plus money bets that you can play. So maybe a guy's over is like 56.5 receiving yards, over under 56.5 receiving yards, but you could also bet over 70 receiving yards, over 80, over 90, over 100. If you're talking to AJ Brown, Nico Collins, maybe you get up to 110, 120, 130, 140, and basically say, hey, if this guy has a huge game, I keep getting plus money at each of these steps along the ladder, and just sort of ladder these bets up. So we both got, I got kind of two to talk about, and these aren't like official bets from our end, but these are just cool things. Actually, one of these, yours is one that we're really, really high on, but yeah, just kind of some cool situations to talk about and kind of help sharpen us as bettors. So, Jreasy, what do you got here on this this first one?
Yeah, we as you said, we've actually got JM with two alt ladders here because we've kind of chosen to go in a different direction here, and we've gone, not with a singular player ladder this week, but a spot where we think the books are very, very slow to adjust. And we're going to go to the Saints game here, and we're going to look at the three players that we think that you can bet is kind of like a player block. I'm sure if you followed 1 week season for a little while, you've seen this with JM and his DFS side of things, getting a couple players from the same team for a certain amount of money that makes sense. And here we think that the odds and the numbers here make sense for Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, and Johnston. These three players have combined for 75% of the targets through 3 games from Spencer Rattler, combining for 33, 24, and 28 targets over those 2 games. Just those 3 players. The Saints are 3rd in the league in dropbacks. They play at the fastest pace, and they're a big underdogs to the Bills to set up another pass-friendly game script. These lines have been moving all over the place. You can see these little yellow boxes here saying that people are hitting them as we're speaking. But we came out, and you're going to have to mix and match here. We were FanDuel and DraftKings. The lines haven't moved as much on these smaller books like MGM, Bet365, BetRivers, but we're going to go with 0.75 units to win on each of these. So you're going to bet however much you need to win $75 if your unit is 100. And we were at Chris Olave over 5.5 receptions, Johnston over 4.5 receptions, and Rashid Shaheed over 3.5. We can see that the Shaheed here is still 3.5. The Johnston's already bumped up to 5.5 at huge plus money. And Chris Olave is already bumped up to 6.5 at plus money. So the public is kind of noticing that, hey, maybe these are all a little bit too low, and bumping them up into these, these next receptions here at plus money. Shop around. They're still available on the smaller books, but it does look like if you're a DraftKings or a FanDuel only kind of dealing with limits, so this one may be, out of the range for you. If that's the case, we think Chris Olave is probably the best one, so just go that way. But, we have these 3 guys. They're all projected at overs, but instead of choosing, picking and choosing which one, we're just going to bet all 3, and we're just going to say, hey, this player block, more often than not, it's going to work out that 2 of these guys are going to go over here. And a game that we just expect huge pass volume once again. Chris Olave leads the league in targets, so that's kind of why we think that maybe that's the best one. It has bumped up here to 6.5, but at plus money, try to find one of the 5.5 at minus 130 or so. Interesting note here on Kamara's pass game usage. He's only been targeted on 10% of his routes this season after never coming in under 24% in his career. So it does kind of look like Spencer Rattler's really locking in on these receivers, locking in on these tight ends, and that AK maybe's falling to 4th on the pecking ladder. It sure seems like that. What do you think, Jam?
Yeah, I mean, I said, well, first off on that, like we had Sean Payton, and then it went to Dennis Allen, right? So it was really the same. We still had the Taysom Hill stuff. We still it was still the same regime and ideas, right, of how to handle this offense, how to attack. Kellen Moore is like a completely different tree, completely different mindset, and so we want to pay attention to what's happening here with Kamara and with where these targets are going. So I sent you the Olave one earlier, and I said, Olave over whatever it was, 5.5 catches. Yeah. I said, this is free money.
Free, I think, yeah.
Free money. And you said, all right, we're already on this with this whole block, right? Yes, like there's a couple components here where to me, one, all right, let's say 3 components. The Saints, the way that they're playing, we talked about this, right? That people have not caught on to this yet. They are going no huddle. They're playing fast. They are not a team that's like, oh, we're a bad team. We're going to get the number 1 overall pick. They're not the Titans, right? The Titans are like 3rd and 16. Let's run the ball and then punt it. No, the Saints are like, all right, let's go out there. Let's attack, right? And even last week against, when they're in Seattle, it was a lot of the issues in that game was holding calls, false start early in the game, right? And they just fell behind so quickly that game went off the rails. But this has not been a bad team. When they were playing at home, they played the Cardinals close. They played the 49ers close. They had a chance to win both those games at the end. And so this is a competitive team. And so then you also have the fact that they're throwing the ball short a lot. Like, second thing I really like here is they're throwing the ball short a lot, right? Their run game, so to speak, is, hey, drop back quick, get the ball out quick, short passes, march the field, right? And so I talked about this in the context of DFS this week in my journal and Discord, but the old Belichick approach was basically, and Devin McCourty talked about this recently, but you could see this from the Patriots for a couple decades. It was like, listen, if we force every team to consistently go on 10, 12, 14 play drives, we're going to win most games just from the opponent shooting themselves in the foot. Most teams cannot go on 10, 12, 14 play drives without a holding penalty, a false start, a dropped pass, sack, something that puts them behind the sticks. And now all of a sudden they can't get to that 3rd and short that's easy to convert, right? 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4, most good teams are going to convert that pretty consistently. Once you get up to 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, most teams are not going to convert that super consistently, right? So force them to march the field, they're going to make those mistakes. Well, what's interesting here is the Bills' defense is good at 2 things, right? One is they're pretty game plan specific just in terms of how they vary their zone coverage and what they're going to force an opponent to look to do. But 2, the Bills are a team that says, we are going to try to force you to march the field. We don't think you can win if you have to march the field over and over again, especially when we've got Josh Allen and this great offense on the other side. Well, do we really think that the Bills are going to say, all right, let's throw everything we can at stopping these short passes and force them to beat us deep because that's the only way we can beat the Saints? Or do you think the Bills are going to say, listen, it's on the road. We've got the Bills Mafia. We've got this great offense. Like, if we force them to march the field, they're going to make enough mistakes that we're going to take control of this game, right? So not only is this how the Saints are trying to win, but it's not something that the Bills should be actively trying to take away. The Bills should be comfortable saying, I mean, it's not like they're going to just leave these guys wide open, but the Bills are going to be comfortable sitting in zone and saying, yeah, if you want to keep throwing 5, 6, 7-yard passes to Olave, Shaheed, Juwan Johnson, go for it. Go ahead and do it. And we think you're going to make a mistake. We think you're going to have that false start, that holding penalty, that dropped pass, whatever it is that you kept having against Seattle. Some of these drives are going to stall out. You're not going to be able to drive the whole field. And if you do, we'll tighten up in the red zone and force you to kick a field goal, and then we'll go down and score a touchdown, right? So I think this lines up great from a standpoint of how the Saints are trying to win games, how the Saints are trying to win games, how the Bills try to stop opponents from winning games, and how that should line up in this spot. So really like this setup here from like a straight bet standpoint, from like different ways that you can play it. And it's the yards I'm not that interested in, right? Because it is just a ton of short passing. But just that volume of passes to these guys makes it really nice. You got anything else to add on that before we swing over to my guys?
Yeah, and we expect Spencer Rattler to make some of those mistakes that the Bills want, right? But a lot of those times it's just going to result in short fields or the pick six, and we're just going to end up getting more volume. But to be honest, Spencer Rattler's actually looked pretty good. He's sixth best. He has the 6th best on target rate for QBs, so he's throwing the ball in catchable places, and he has a positive completion percentage over expectation. It's a little bit different than the stuff that we usually put out. I don't think we've ever done anything like this before, but these 3 are actually 9-0 to the over on their week 4 lines, or what they were at least on the 5.5, 4.5, 3.5. So they all can hit at the same time, and they all have hit 3 weeks in a row.
Yeah.
So it's not like we're playing the game where, hey, stealing from Peter to pay Paul. All these guys can hit and have shown to hit at the same time. And each line has actually only gone up 1 reception since week 1. So despite the Saints setting the standard for volume and speed, not only are these guys getting off a lot of plays, they are running each play the quickest of anybody in the NFL. So it does, for a team that came out that everybody thought was going to be so bad and has been slow in the past, it seems interesting to us that each of these players have only seen their reception targets or reception totals go up 1 each. So we just think we're a little bit early, and as we can see now, they are starting to pop up. And we don't think it will be like this next week.
Yeah. Now and on top of all that, we have a spot where the game flow works in their favor. The matchup works in their favor in terms of what the Bills are trying to stop. Yeah, I mean, it's just a really great setup there. All right, so I've got two that are not as slam dunk as those ones, but we're talking alt lines. We're talking places where we could just go way over. So I threw two at you before we hopped on air, and you were like, why don't we kind of discussed them. You were like, why don't we just roll with both? Like, let's just talk about both. And they're both players who I think that the betting market has been slow to adjust on. The public has been slow to adjust on because we have like entrenched thoughts around these players in our mind. So one is Daniel Jones, 215.5 passing yards against the Rams. And we got to get out of here pretty soon. So I'm going to just hit on some quick thoughts on these guys. But real quickly, first off, we know that this Colts offense looks good. Secondly, we know that Daniel Jones does poorly when pressured, but the Rams are able to get pressure. But the other team that we would look at this spot and be like, I don't know if Daniel Jones can stay out of pressure. It's a game against the Broncos, and the Colts were able to scheme up and block well against that Broncos line and buy Daniel Jones that time to continue doing what he's been doing. What's great about this thing is if you can get that front four of the Rams blocked, you're not really worried about the Rams secondary. And the Rams, unlike a team that's got, one superstar weapon or one or two great guys, the Colts don't really have a superstar, but a lot like the Bills, they have a lot of really good players that they're able to mix and match. And so it's harder for a team like the Rams to figure out like, hey, let's isolate this guy. Let's figure out a way to stop this guy. And if they can't get that rush to Daniel Jones consistently with four guys or even some blitzes with five guys, like if they can't consistently move him off his spot, then the Colts should be able to do what they've been doing here. And on top of that, we lose Alec Pierce, but they've got depth there with Adonai Mitchell stepping in. Mm-hmm. So I'm assuming we won't have Alec Pierce because of the concussion. But AD Mitchell can step in for that downfield component. And so 215.5 passing yards really feels low to me. The other one we're going to hit is Quentin Johnston over 15.5 receiving yards. So Josh, I threw this to you and you said, do you think Quentin Johnston's for real? And I said, I do, honestly. And you were like, yeah, I kind of do too. We talked about that a little bit, but the step that he's taken forward this year is clear. Like it's evident, and it's clear and evident that the Chargers believe in him in terms of how they are using him, how they're calling plays designed to go to him, short throws, downfield throws. And so do I want to take the over on 15.5? No. But do I like the idea of taking that ladder of like, if he goes over 15.5, he's capable of going for 110, 115, 120, right? So you kind of hit those marks on the way up, whether it's like 0.1 units at like 60, 70, 80, 90, or whether you go like 0.05 units, five, if your typical unit's $100, still $5 on each step of this ladder, and maybe go all the way up to 110, 120 yards on somebody like Quentin Johnston. So both guys where I think that the priors and the way that the public perceives them is still kind of affecting the lines that we're getting on ththese guys.
Yeah, if you just bring up the screen here, we have Quentin Johnston at 70 plus at plus 200, all the way up to 120 plus at 120 plus at almost 14-1. So there's a lot of rungs on this ladder that you can hit. I was mentioning before the show that I own quite a few Lad McConkey bags in the second, and those seem almost dead with how good Keenan Allen has been to start the season and how much Johnston has, improved from week one. I mentioned earlier, it used to be very common that, we gave receivers a couple years to learn how to be a pro in the NFL. And, we've had such big playmakers come out recently in the wide receiver position that we've kind of lost that. And, it is not outside the realm of possibility that Quentin Johnston has figured it out and him and Herbert are going to be, really tough to handle.
Yeah. I mean, it was Mike Evans, Odell Beckham rookie year was like the first time that it was like, oh, rookie wide receivers can actually make an impact. Like the rule up until that point was, don't even worry about rookie wide receivers. And so there are still those players who it takes them until that second, third year to really develop into what people thought they could be. And so will Quentin Johnston ever like justify, first round draft pick status? Maybe not, but he looks really good this year. And like that's pretty clear if you're watching these games, right? That he looks good and the Chargers feel like he looks good. They have confidence in him right now. And so having these picks where there's room to the upside are things that we really like. So Josh, anything else that you want to throw out there before we get out of here today?
No, just the last thing on Johnston there is teams always want to see the guys that they drafted succeed. So teams are always going to try to, they don't want to throw in the towel. They don't want to admit mistakes. So, when things start moving or start rolling in the right direction, there's only more incentive for teams to just continue to pile it on and just prove to themselves and the world that, this pick was right. And we're glad that we have this guy on our team.
Yeah. I like that shout too. So that's going to do it for us today. I got to get out of here and take William to soccer practice, even though he won't be at a soccer game on Saturday. Apparently still go practice. So, I got to take him to soccer practice. But I appreciate you guys hanging out with us as always. Those of you who are watching live, those of you who are watching after the fact, remember, hop into Props Insider. We'll have those NFL bets, but also those CFL bets, which have been really, really nice to have that ROI on our side so far this year. And then, as you can see on your screen, if you're watching on YouTube, we've got a $1 week pass this week. If you hang out around OWS content, but don't have a membership, you can get DFS content for $1 this week. Just no code, just go to the week pass and it's $1 this week. So yeah, with that, signing off for me, for Jreasy, we will see you back here next Thursday, and we will see you at the top of the props boards this weekend.